This article's been written by John Wood. John Wood is the founder and board chairman of Room to Read, and also the author of Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. The title is Not Every Path Should Be Linear. Levels, intermediate up. We live in a world that has a lot of predefined notions of success. We are supposed to study hard, get good grades, go to the best university, work for a prestigious firm. The list goes on. Societal expectations can be good for us by pointing the way forward, but they also risk becoming a straitjacket that stifles creativity. I was on such a path throughout the first 15 years of my life after high school. Intent on proving myself at a young age, I was lucky enough to join Microsoft back in 1991, when it was still a small and young company. I rose through the ranks over the course of a fast-moving decade. Living overseas, I had it all. First class, round-the-world airline tickets, a fully subsidized house in Beijing, 2 housekeepers, and a car with a full-time driver. What I was beginning to lack, however, was passion. I felt that my life was devoted to making rich people richer. At age 34, I asked myself, is this all there is? I had the good fortune one day to discover a potential non-linear path. As an escape from my job, I decided to make a solo trek through the Himalayas, an 18-day, 200-mile journey along Nepal's famous Annapurna circuit. For months leading up to the trip, I fantasized about being out in the crisp, clean mountain air, trekking as high as 18,000 feet among glaciers and yaks. But on day 2 of my trek, life threw something in my path that would change my course forever. Along the trail, I met the headmaster of a local school. He invited me to visit the school to meet some of his 450 students. I felt excited, thinking this was a chance to see the real Nepal, not the tourist version. The school itself wasn't much to speak of. Mud walls, a leaky sheet, metal roof, and dirt floors. The students didn't have desks, and the chalkboard was the size of a postage stamp. But what really struck me was the school's, and I quote, library. A library in name only. It was an empty room utterly devoid of books. Why? I asked the headmaster. How can you have 450 students and yet not have something as fundamental as books? His answer hit me hard. We are too poor to afford education in Nepal, he said sadly. His face dropped and his eyes dulled as he finished the thought. But until we have education, we will always be poor. It struck me that the headmaster's lament said more about global poverty than any fancy academic report ever could. I had traveled enough to know that the billion people in this world living on less than $1 a day aren't dumb, nor are they lazy. They are simply caught in this trap of being too poor to afford education, but without it. It was on that day that the idea for Room to Read was born. Within 2 months, I had started a book drive, and soon thereafter I quit my executive position at Microsoft to create an organization that would bring thousands and ultimately millions of books to eager young students like those in Nepal. A lot of people told me that I was crazy to give up millions of dollars in stock options to devote my life to this cause. But I reminded myself that nobody ever erected a statue in honor of a critic. It's so easy to criticize. It's much harder to build. But ultimately, it's only the builders who matter. Had I chosen to stay on my comfortable linear path in life, Room to Read would never have been established. Instead, because I chose to go non-linear, more than 5 million children today have access to the 10,000 libraries we've opened during our first decade in operation. I don't believe that people should always follow non-linear paths. If you constantly go non-linear, you might end up running around in a random pattern and failing to accomplish anything of significance. But if you go only linear in life, you might suffer that worst of all fates, being boring and never knowing what might have been possible if you'd taken a risk. And believe me, the world has enough boring adults. So that is the challenge. It's knowing when to go linear and when to go nonlinear. It can be hard to determine, but there is a time for each in life.